Suspense. Expect the unexpected by Renuka Nayak. The Betrayal. Harry was going through his mail. There were bills to be paid and a couple of letters to read through. He would read them later. There was also a blue envelope with no return address on it. There was nothing else written on it other than his name and address. Who could have sent it? He would check later. He entered the house and kept his mail aside. He was tired and desperately wanted a cup of coffee. He made some coffee and sat on his favorite rocking chair. He took a sip of the coffee and closed his eyes. It felt heavenly. He had a pile of work waiting for him at office the next day. Work pressure had increased of late. He decided to have a word with his boss about an increment soon. Harry had remained a bachelor out of choice. He had decided to stay single all his life. He felt that life is much easier being single. Marriage brought along a lot of responsibilities and complications. His parents had taught him that much. They had never been happy together, always finding reasons to pick up a fight. He was content with life. Lost in thoughts, his attention drifted to the blue envelope again. He picked it from the stack of letters. He found it a little strange. An anonymous letter. Who could it be? He wondered. He opened the envelope. There was a note in it. "You are going to die." Harry read it once again. What a strange note it was, he thought. It was probably a prank. He tore the note and put it in the dustbin. He did not have time for such pranks. He had a lot on his mind. He did not need any distractions. Next morning, Harry finished breakfast quickly and left for work. He reached his office on time. He had a lot to do today. He reached his desk. There was more mail waiting for him. He went through it hastily and was surprised to find a similar blue envelope. He stopped for a second. It was once again anonymous, similar to the one he had received last night. He quickly opened it. "You will die soon, that's a promise," read the note. The words were scribbled carelessly on the note. Harry reread the note. Who could be sending the note? He did not have any enemies. He kept to himself. He was polite to all. He preferred being on his own. He was not a very social person. He could not think of a single person who could play such a mean prank on him. He thought of reporting the matter to the police. That day, Harry took more time than usual to finish his work. His mind wandered to the note time and again. What could the sender of the note mean? That evening, when Harry reached home, there was no blue envelope waiting for him. He entered the house a bit relieved. He sat down with his usual cup of coffee. The letters had begun to haunt him. He could not put the thought out of his mind. Was it only a prank, or did someone actually intend to kill him? It could be someone he didn't know, probably a psychopath. Anything was possible in today's world. People did not need any special reason to kill. Some of them did it only for the thrill of it. He made a list of people he knew. His neighbor was an old man, Mr. Jones. He was a widower. Often his children would visit him. But Mr. Jones was out of question. He did not fit the bill at all. But why an old man like him? No, it was not possible. No one new had moved into the building. There was the same old bunch of people living there, and none of them seemed to be the least interested in him. At his workplace, there were 5 people working in his department and about 100 more working in the company. He was only in touch with the people in his department. He had made an effort to keep away from the others. None of the people he worked with seemed capable of such an act, but he would keep an eye on them. That night, Harry latched all the doors and windows. He double-checked the doors before retiring to bed. He could not take a chance. He slept lightly that night. The next morning, as usual, he prepared his breakfast and sat down to eat. His gaze fell on the blue envelope on the table. It had not been there the previous night. He remembered checking the table. Harry got up and checked the doors and windows. He found his bedroom window open. He remembered too well he had closed it the previous night. He ran back to the table and opened the envelope. The countdown begins now. Get ready to die. Harry decided that he had had enough. He got out of his house and headed to the police station. He reported the case to Inspector Goodwill. So this is the third time you have received such a note. Do you suspect anyone, Mr. Harry? Is there anyone who would want to harm you? Try to remember. Is there anyone holding a grudge against you? Have you noticed any strange behavior around you? Try to remember. The smallest of information can lead us to the culprit. Oh, Inspector, I cannot think of a single person who could do such a thing. I mean, why would someone do this to me? I do not interfere in others' matters. And I believe I am a peaceful person. I don't get into fights. I keep to myself most of the time, said Harry. After a short pause, he continued, However, there is only one thing that is bothering me. Is it possible that someone is playing a prank on me? But then, how did the person manage to get into my house at night? Can a prankster go to such an extent, or could it be the work of a psychopath? The inspector found Harry constantly fidgeting with his tie. He surely looked scared. Don't worry about it. I'll send my men to keep a watch on your place. Maybe the culprit would turn up to plant another letter. Thank you, Inspector. I hope the culprit is caught soon. Harry left for work after spending some time at the police station. On his way, he kept checking his back, lest someone followed him, but he did not find anything suspicious. Once he reached office, he found himself checking out his colleagues for any strange behavior, but everything appeared to be normal. He did not find any difference in their behavior. He finished his work at the usual time and left for home. He dreaded going home. Staying single had not been such a good idea after all. He took the long route home. He was in no hurry to reach. On reaching his apartment, he glanced at his neighbor's house. It looked like no one was home. He entered his house with some reluctance. At a distance, Inspector Goodwill and two other officers were keeping an eye on Harry's apartment. The two officers, John and Michael, had been there all day long, but he had noticed nothing strange. They saw Harry enter his apartment. Harry was a timid-looking man. He slouched a little as he walked. He was not very tall. Inspector Goodwill and the two officers decided to wait all night outside the apartment. At around midnight, they saw a man leaving the apartment. The man was wearing a long black coat and a black hat. He was trying to cover his face from the cold wind. He was a tall man with a confident walk. He looked around suspiciously before entering his car. John and Michael, follow the man. Find out who he is, ordered Inspector Goodwill. The man drove away in his car. The two officers followed him. Inspector Goodwill decided to check on Harry. On reaching Harry's floor, he found the neighbor's door slightly ajar. He decided to have a word with the neighbor, Mr. Jones. He knocked at the door. There was no response. He peeped inside. Mr. Jones, are you there? He called out. There was still no response. In the meanwhile, the two officers followed the tall man. The man stopped at a pub. The officers followed him inside. They saw him talking to another man. His back was towards them. They tried to get a closer look at his face, but it was dark and crowded inside the pub, and they were unable to catch a clear glimpse of his face. After a few minutes, they lost track of the man. Oh no, where did he go? They searched every nook and corner of the pub, but he had vanished without a trace. Let's get back to the apartment and wait for the man there, Michael said to his colleague. Meanwhile, Inspector Goodwill decided to search Mr. Jones' house. There was no one in the house. He checked the drawers but found nothing important. Then he went to the kitchen. There was a cup of coffee lying in the sink. There were cigarette butts lying in the dustbin. He opened the refrigerator. He could smell the stale pizza lying in there. Harry had told him that the old man lived alone. But where was he now at this hour? Why was the door open? The inspector entered the bedroom. The bed was neatly done. He opened the wardrobe and was surprised at what he found. Inspector Goodwill saw several blue envelopes lying in the cupboard. Next to the envelopes lay a picture of Harry. There was a bright red cross on the picture. Just then, Inspector Goodwill heard a gunshot in the next house. He rushed towards the sound. The door to Harry's house was locked from inside. The other two officers who had also heard the gunshots soon joined Inspector Goodwill. They together broke open the door. They found Harry holding a gun. He had a scared look on his face. There was a man lying on the floor in a pool of blood. He was dead. Harry, put the gun down, ordered the inspector. Harry threw the gun down. It was not my fault, Inspector. This man barged into my house and tried to kill me. He spoke with panic writ large on his face. I have no idea how he entered my house, but he took me by surprise. He said that he had come to kill me, that it would all get over in a few seconds. In an attempt to save my life, I jumped on him and tried to pull away the gun. Accidentally, the gun fired and hit him. I'm not a killer. You have to believe me, Inspector. I'm not a killer. He covered his face and began sobbing loudly. Who was he? And why did he want to kill you? Asked the inspector. He is my neighbor, Mr. Jones, and I have no idea as to why he wanted to kill me. Harry spoke in a dead tone, as if all the energy had seeped out of him. Do not worry, Mr. Harry. We have enough proof to prove your innocence. We can prove in the court that you shot him only in self-defense, Inspector Goodwill explained. It was soon proved in the court that Harry was innocent and that Jones had tried to kill him. The blue envelopes and the picture found in Mr. Jones' house were enough to convince the court of Harry's innocence. The intention was yet not known, but Mr. Jones had been planning Harry's murder all along. Harry was set free. Now you're a free man, Harry, said the inspector. All thanks to you, Inspector, replied Harry, with tears in his eyes. The inspector wished him good luck. Harry walked out. At a distance, there was a car waiting for him. He entered the car. Mission accomplished, said the man seated next to him. It was the same tall man whom the officers had been following that night. Harry smiled back. Yes, sir, it was all smoothly done. Well done, Harry. Finally, the business is all mine. My wait is over. The man smiled and handed over a bundle of notes to Harry. Count it. That's your share. The tall man was Joseph, Mr. Jones' son. Mr. Jones was a rich man. Joseph was his only son. Joseph was a mean man. He had been mishandling his father's money. He was into gambling and owed a lot of money to a lot of people. On learning about his habits, Mr. Jones had asked him to straighten up his act. But Joseph had not paid any heed. Mr. Jones had finally warned him that he would write up his business and property to charity and disown him. So Joseph had hatched a plan with Harry to kill the old man without anyone suspecting him for it. That night, Harry invited Mr. Jones home for dinner and shot him dead. He then planted the envelopes and the picture in his house. Luckily for him, the inspector reached there at the right time. Everything had fallen into place as per his plan. Harry collected the money and walked back home a happy man. He had a lot of work pending at the office tomorrow. And yes, he would talk to his boss about the increment.